I will pass you over to Roman and look forward to this evening's conversation. We'll have an intro, Roman will give a talk, and then there'll be time for Q&A. If you want to put your questions in the chat, I'll be able to pick those up during the session, and we'll go through them, or certainly as many of them as we can at the end. But thanks for that. Without any further ado, we'll pass you over to Roman Pichler.
Thank you very much, Stuart, for the kind introduction. Let me try and share my screen with you. So hopefully you can all see a slide that says tips for using product goals in Scrum. So that's what I'd like to focus on today. So yeah, product goals are a fairly new addition to Scrum. I personally very much welcome the addition. I like working with product goals, and I've been working with product goals for a number of years. And so I thought I'd share my perspective on how you can possibly use them. And in order to start out, I thought I'll share what the current version of the Scrum Guide says about this new, at least in Scrum, in the Scrum framework, new concepts. So the latest version came out in November, and in case you missed it, here are some extracts. So the Scrum Guide says, the product goal describes a future state of the product. It is the long-term objective for the Scrum team. And I think it also suggests that the Scrum team, and just as a reminder, the Scrum team are the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the developers, and I'm formally referred to as the development team. So the idea, I think, is also that the Scrum team works on one product goal at a time and has to sort of meet the product goal before the next one can be worked on. And then the Scrum Guide suggests that the product goal should be in the product backlog and in a way constrain the product backlog, or scope the product backlog, we could say. The rest of the product backlog emerges to define what will fulfill the product goal. And then finally, the product owner in Scrum is accountable for developing and explicitly communicating the product goal, and the entire Scrum team is focused on one product goal at a time. So that's what the Scrum Guide says, and as I'm sure you all know, Scrum is a very simple framework that wants to help teams develop complex products. And so, you know, Scrum typically isn't prescriptive in the sense that there's a lot of information about specific concepts or ideas. And the Scrum Guide very much leaves it at this level when it comes to product goals. Now, when I read this, and when I started talking to people about product goals in Scrum, you know, it occurred to me that historically there are two other goals in Scrum. There's certainly the sprint goal, and that is part of the Scrum Guide, the formal Scrum framework. And for me, the sprint goal should really describe the outcome, the desired outcome, or the desired benefit of a sprint, the reason for carrying out the sprint, what we'd like to achieve with a specific iteration, with a specific sprint. And you know, the maximum length is 4 weeks. I think the most common length for sprints tends to be 2 weeks. So it's a very tactical, execution-focused goal. It's still about, in my mind, still about capturing an outcome, but it's very short-term. It's very, very tactical, very detailed, you could say. And then, at least in the traditional Scrum literature, there's a second goal. There's the vision. And the vision is a very big, huge goal. You can think of it as a big, hairy, audacious goal that describes the purpose for offering the product, the positive change the product should bring about. And I'll share some examples of those goals in a couple of minutes. So this is a really huge, very high-level inspirational goal. And my suggestion would be to really think big and you know, look ahead to the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years. And you may never fully meet or realize the vision. That's fine, as long as it provides some fundamental guidance and alignment for product owner, development team stakeholders, and of course the Scrum Master. So where's the product goal then? Somewhere between, I guess, this sprint goal and the vision. And so for me, I like to place it here, just above the sprint goal. And as as the quotes that I just shared with you suggest, the product goal wants to describe a future state of the product. And I'd say, wouldn't it be nice if it also captured the desired benefit or outcome that the product should create? And if that's the case, then we could use a product goal in order to help us select the right sprint goals. Or to put it differently, every sprint and every sprint goal should help us move closer towards the product goal. And by meeting the sprint goals, we should then eventually also meet our product goal. Now that would, oops, sorry. shows you how well I know my slides. Well, I'll talk a little bit about the horizon, the time frame for product goals in a minute. But before I do that, some people have said, oh, do we get from the vision directly to the product goal? And in fact, suggested that. Personally, I would suggest that you consider taking an intermediate step, that from the vision you derive user and business goals. And essentially by that, I mean the product's value proposition, the reason for people to engage with the product, to use the product, the specific problem the product should solve, or the tangible benefit it should offer, and the desired business benefits. So the reason for the company, for your business to invest in a product. And as I said, the user and business goals should be derived from the vision, or by meeting the user and the business goals, we should get closer to realizing our vision. And then the user and business goals, they should provide the context for choosing the right product goal. So what I've built up here is a set of cascading goals, as the heading of the slide suggests, or a hierarchy of goals. These goals are systematically linked, they're interconnected. And again, I like to start top down with the vision, and then from the vision derive the user and business goals, and then break those user and business goals into one or more product goals. And then a specific product goal creates the context, acts as an umbrella for selecting the right sprint goals. Now, what about timeframes with regards to user and business goals? I mean, these are goals that I would capture typically in a product strategy. So the maximum time frame or duration that a product strategy is valid for is a product lifecycle stage, such as, say, introduction or growth, for instance. And with the product goal, as it's a more specific, more tangible goal, at least that's my suggestion, how I like to, or that's how I like to apply, and it's my suggestion how you might want to use the product goal. I like to limit it to the next 2 to 6 months. And so you can see that these goals become progressively more detailed, and they become shorter and shorter in terms of the time frame or horizon that they cover. And the vision, again, is a visionary, inspirational goal, and then user and business goals. And I'd also say product goals are strategic goals, and then the sprint goal would be a tactical, execution-oriented goal. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'd like to share some examples for those goals with you. So here are some sample goals. As the vision, we could, for instance, say, help people eat healthily. Help people eat healthily, or maybe even shorter, healthy eating. So I like to work with short, concise visions, maybe a slogan, as in this case. And now from this vision, we have to derive, the next step would be to derive user and business goals. So let's do that. So the user goal would be reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And the business goal would be to create a new revenue source and generate revenue. Now we've got the user and business goal, and we can take the next step and discover a product goal. And one product goal here would be to help the users understand their eating habits and acquire an initial user base. So that might be a good goal for an MVP, a first public release of a new product, or the minimum viable product that we want to offer. And then what about a sprint goal? Well, maybe the goal of the first sprint could be to validate, to test that users are willing to share personal information when activating the app. So, imagine this is a healthy eating app, and it's likely to ask you as a user for things like your age and your gender and weight and dietary requirements or allergies and eating preferences and so forth. And some people may be reluctant to give away this information before they've not tried out the product and kind of build some trust into the product. So you can see that I've tried to derive those goals from each other, so they're connected, but it's not only a top-down relationship that connects those goals, but it's also the other way around, bottom-up. And that is, if we struggle to meet our sprint goals, then this is likely to indicate that there's something not quite right with the product goal, and we may have to adjust or rework this goal. And if we fail to meet one or more product goals, again, we should reflect on the consequences for the user and business goals and see if we have to make any changes to those goals. And if we fail to meet the user and business goals that we've set ourselves, well, maybe then there's something not quite right with the vision. And maybe we have to adjust the vision, or maybe we should just stop the development efforts and look for a different vision and a different idea altogether. So again, these are connected, cascading goals. Now, I've mentioned that I like to use a product goal to describe a specific benefit that the product offers. And so here it's, again, stands between the user and the business goals and the sprint goal. And I find it helpful not only to identify a single product goal, generally speaking, but actually I like to derive a number of product goals. So, you know, if you have a goal like, I'd like to understand my, sorry, let me just quickly go back. If you have a user and business goal like reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, then it probably makes sense not only to think about what might be the goal for an MVP, the very first public release, but think about maybe the next 1 or 2 or 3 future releases and say, oh, how could the product possibly grow? How could it emerge? And what specific goals could our product then meet? And this is where the product roadmap comes in. And this is where I feel there's a great symbiosis, can you say that? Between the product roadmap and product goals in Scrum. So here is a structure of a product roadmap, and as it happens, it's a structure that I suggested a number of years ago, but it doesn't really matter if you like the structure or not. If you like it, that's great. If you don't like it, that's equally great. The point I'd like to make here, and what I'd like to draw your attention to, is that this is a goal-oriented product roadmap. Goal-oriented product roadmaps have been around for a number of years, and to be honest, I do not know who came up with the idea, the concept. So this is a specific version of such a goal-oriented roadmap, and the idea with the product goal here is, or these goals generally is, that they describe benefits or outcomes. You know, the reason for progressing the product, for investing in the product, for offering, for instance, a new version or a new major release. And in this case, you know, I very much view the goal on our product roadmap as a product goal. So I think there's a great fit. And, you know, we could say the initial goal for an MVP is to acquire the user base and help me understand my eating habits. We've already heard those goals. And then maybe of the next major release or version, the goal could be to grow the user base, attract more users, and then improve my eating habits for those users. And then generate revenue in our purchases as the business goal, and get fitter as the user goal. So you can see that this is a meaningful progression, that it sort of, you know, makes sense that these goals also built on each other in order to grow the user base. Of course, you know, I first have to have an initial user base, and in order to improve my eating habits, of course, I first have to be able to understand my current habits. And so, you know, what I've tried to do here is I've tried to use those goals to describe a meaningful story about the likely growth of the product, which I find is very helpful in order to create an alignment, align the stakeholders and the development teams. And a roadmap can also be very useful in order to attract some funding if that's something that you have to do. Now, you may notice that these goals are dual goals, that in fact, you know, I've stated 2 goals, or I've, you know, have 2 sub-goals for each product goal. That's maybe another way to look at it. But for me, that's okay, because these goals are tightly coupled. So I can't acquire an initial user base if I don't do a good job at helping the users understand their eating habits. Or to sort of, to put it differently, if I'm able to help the users understand their eating habits, then surely that should allow me to acquire an initial user base. So if you prefer to work with singular or atomic product goals, that's perfectly cool. You could just focus on the business goals or on the user goals. Again, user and business goals should be closely connected. Let's maybe fill in the rest of this roadmap. So here are some rough timeframes, and then maybe some names if we want to use that element, and then some high-level features, some very coarse-grained capabilities that offer an idea what might be needed in order to meet particularly the user goals, help people understand their eating habits. So you have here, for instance, a healthy eating dashboard feature, or the ability to integrate with smartwatches and fitness devices. And then finally, some metrics here in order to ensure that the product goals are specific and measurable. So that'd be my suggestion, that if you use product goals in the sense that I've suggested here, that you ensure that they are specific, and again, that you can tell if you've met the goal or not, so that they are measurable. Now, what I've done so far is I've tried to explain how do what's my understanding of product goals, how do I use them, and how do they fit to other goals, such as the vision and the sprint goal, and why would it make sense not only to identify one product goal at a given point in time, but if we can look ahead and maybe identify the next 2 to 3, 4 goals, maybe for the next 12 months or so, and then capture them on a product roadmap. Now, the Scrum Guide, however, if you remember, says the product goal lives in the product backlog. So what's then the connection between this product roadmap and the product backlog, and where's the product goal? where should it be? Well, first of all, here is the roadmap, and here is a backlog. And for me, a product roadmap is a strategic product plan. So we have product goals or outcomes on here. We have dates or timeframes and key features. And here we have the product backlog. And the product backlog for me is a detailed plan. So something that I find is more suited to facilitate building a product and then offering appropriate elements of a user experience and appropriate features and pieces of functionality. So we've got epics in there, we've got user stories in the non-functional requirements, workflow diagrams, scenarios, UI sketches, and mockups. And so how do we get from the product roadmap to the product backlog? Well, this is where I find the product goal is tremendously valuable. So I would suggest that we use the next product goal on the product roadmap, and then leverage this goal in order to focus or scope the product backlog and identify the right product backlog items, the right product details, you could say. And I've always thought that stocking a product backlog and managing a product backlog, prioritizing a product backlog without any goal in mind, without any clear focus, is very difficult. And so what I feel that the product goal really gives us now this focus. And so you can identify product goals in the context of your product roadmap, and then you just kind of copy and paste them into your product backlog. And so you're being a 100%. I don't know. There's 100% conformity with the current Scrum Guide, if that is important to you. I've got a horrible feeling that I've got this slide duplicated now, because that seems a slightly outdated version. Let's see. Oh yeah. Oh, this is the nicer version, slightly nicer version. Sorry about this. It's exactly the same information. I don't know. That was a mistake. Obviously, the older version obviously should have been removed. Cool. So that's my take on the connection between the product roadmap and the product backlog, and how the product goal helps us then derive the right product backlog items, and then actually make that connection, build that link. However, the best goals aren't particularly useful if it's only if or the best product goal, I should say, is not particularly useful if this goal is something that the product owner has come up with. And the individual has created an amazing, beautiful goal, but the developers, the development team members, and the stakeholders, they don't really understand it. They don't really buy into it or support it. So I'm a big fan of trying to set goals collaboratively, and I'm a big fan of trying to involve the stakeholders and development team members or developers into the process of identifying product goals and agreeing on product goals. So here we have the Scrum product owner, here we have the developers or development team members, and here we have key stakeholders. And a key stakeholder is somebody who has an interest in the product, but somebody who the Scrum product owner needs in order to be able to progress the product, to develop the product, design the product, or offer the product. So that might be somebody from marketing, sales, support, service, possibly operations, maybe finance for a commercial product. And we have, of course, the Scrum Master here. And so my suggestion would be that you consider getting together, say, for a product roadmap workshop, and you invite at least some of the developers, representatives from the development team, and the key stakeholders. And in this workshop, the Scrum product owner should lead the effort to identify new product goals, and the others contribute. And the Scrum Master facilitates the workshop, makes sure that there's some ground rules, that everybody has the opportunity to be heard and to be to contribute, that nobody dominates. I think what you don't want, and what obviously is a danger, depending on how used people are to collaborative decision making and to teamwork, and is that a key stakeholder dominates and wants to win. And then you suffer from the hippo syndrome, that the highest paid person opinion wins. But that's obviously not what should happen. But the idea is that by tapping into the collective wisdom and creativity here of the people, you increase the chances of identifying the right goals and making the right product decisions. And by involving people in the decision-making process, in the goal-setting process, you maximize the chances that people have a shared understanding and that people support those goals and then actually see them through and work towards them and carry out the related decisions. So I find that when people are invited to contribute, and be it that you just consult them, say you're the Scrum product owner, and maybe you don't have the time to go through a more time-consuming, use a more time-consuming decision rules such as unanimity, say, or consent. And you say, all I can do is really I can consult people. But if you honestly, empathically, and attentively listen to the individuals, then often people are willing to support you, even if they don't feel that the goals that you've chosen are necessarily the ones that they themselves would have ideally picked. So it maximizes the chances that people understand the goals and actually support them. So I hope this was useful to you. As a summary, product goals I find are great to express specific measurable outcomes or benefits a product should create. Again, I like to suggest to determine not only a single product goal, but if you can, look ahead for the next 12 months and determine product goals for that time frame and capture them on a product roadmap, on a goal-oriented product roadmap. And make sure that they are connected to the overarching user and business goals, and thereby that they're connected to the overarching product strategy. And then try and set product goals together with the key stakeholders, developers, and the Scrum Masters. And as I just tried to explain, it maximizes the chances that people actually support the goals and work towards them. Again, if they're only your goal as the Scrum product owner, if they're only your goals, then they may not be that valuable at all. And finally, use the next product goal in order to focus your product backlog. All the product backlog items should really serve to meet this specific goal. And it's a great way to understand if you should add an item to the product backlog or not, if the item is likely to help you to meet this goal, you probably should consider adding it, or you should probably consider add it. You should probably add it. God, you should probably add it to the product backlog. But if the item doesn't help to meet this goal, then you probably shouldn't add the item to the backlog. So thank you very much for your attention. If you'd like to find out more, then please check out my website. And Stuart's already kindly mentioned one of my books. My book, Strategize, talks more about product road mapping practices in general, about product strategy. And if you're interested in more detail, more of my thoughts on goal setting and choosing the right goals, then check out my latest book, How to Lead in Product Management. And I'm very much looking forward to your questions now. But if for whatever reason you don't get your question answered, then don't be shy. Please reach out to me, preferably via email. So thank you again.
Okay, thank you very much, Roman. As always, very useful, very informative, and very interesting. So we've had a few questions in, but everybody feel free to add more questions in the chat, and I will pick those up and answer them as well. First one, I haven't actually. I forgot to make a note of the name of the person who's asked these questions, so apologies for that. So I'll read out the questions and we'll take things from there. So first question, when you say product goal appears in the backlog, the question, in what context? That carries on, say, when we tend to be familiar with bug story, epic feature as a roll-up, not sure how goal resides alongside these. So I suppose, how does product goal reside in the backlog alongside bug story, epic, and feature?
Yeah, nice question. Thank you for asking this question. So the way I would look at a product goal in the context of a product backlog, it's very much like an overarching headline, and that says, okay, so for the next 3 to 6 months, this is what we're focused on. This is what this is what we're trying to achieve. This is why we're implementing all these items. This is why we're offering new functionality or enhanced functionality. Now, how you sort of technically make it happen, I think that'll very much depend on your product backlog tool. If you use a paper-based product backlog, which I'm still sort of a fan of, I know, given the current times, it's not very practical, and often electronic tools are superior. I freely admit that. But I mean, if you use a simple product backlog tool, then I'd say just add it. And so I personally would like to see it at the top, so it's really there, and it really sort of says this is the purpose of all the items below. How you do it, say, in Jira, I wouldn't know. I'm not a Jira expert, but I think that's just something for you to figure out. And again, I mean, the Scrum Guide says it should be in the product backlog. I think for me, the point is not so much that it's actually physically placed in the product backlog. The point is to use it in order to scope the product backlog and guide the process of stocking the product backlog, finding the right product backlog items, and then guide the product backlog management, the process of evaluating existing items, and particularly requests for new items and ideas for new items. I think this is where a product goal becomes tremendously valuable.
Okay, excellent. So I think I just picked out that. Oh no, I did have too many names here, so I'll come back to that one. Right, next question. Actually, initially a statement followed by a question from somebody else. So James said, these cascading goals feel very much aligned to the OKR goal setting framework. Makes a lot of sense and helps create transparency. But Mutlu followed up with a question on that. Is it really beneficial or useful to position objectives in the OKRs as the product goals?
So you can think of product goals as objectives. And then if you follow my suggestions and you put your product goals on a product roadmap, then the key results will be the date or time frame. It would include the features, and it would include metrics. Just using the product roadmap structure the product roadmap template that I shared with you. So that's what you can do. And I mean, generally, I mean, historically, at least, looking at the context in which OKRs emerged in the 1970s at Intel, objectives at least used to be goals where you can clearly tell if they've been met or not. So, historically, objectives were at least specific and measurable. So in that sense, there's a great fit. But I mean, I published an article on OKRs, I think in December. So for those of you who are more interested in OKRs in product management and in a product context, maybe take a look at the article. I personally, I experienced OKRs when I was working at Intel in the 1990s. But I personally wouldn't use them necessarily to describe product-related goals. You can if that's valuable for you and the development team and the stakeholders, of course. If everybody is familiar with OKRs, that specific method of setting and tracking goals, but maybe there's some better alternatives, even better.
Okay, thanks, Roman. All right, next question from Jamie. With large transformation of an entire product, multiple sub-products under there, all being released independently, would you recommend setting a product goal at the MVP or the desired state of each sub-product? I'm just trying to understand that one myself.
I was just about to say, sorry, Stuart, can you read out that question again?
Yeah, okay. So with large transformation of entire product, so then it's in brackets, multiple sub-products under there, all being released independently.
Okay.
Would you recommend setting a product goal at the MVP, so I'm assuming across all the products, or the desired state of each sub-product? Yeah, so I guess it's large transformation. Do you set do you look at the setting product goal at the total level or at the sub level?
Yes, nice question. So thank you. So for me, I'd identify a goal or goals for each product. So I'd set it at the product level. And I mean, sometimes products are bundled and then offered as a package, as a bundle. Sometimes a product consists of multiple products, and you have something like an aggregate product. But I'd always do it at a product level. And interesting enough, the new Scrum guide for the first time actually offers a definition of what a product is. And I think from what I remember, it talks about the product being there to create value or being a value-creating vehicle, which is something that resonates certainly with me. And I would suggest that a product is an entity that creates value for a group of users or customers, and for the business at the same time. And so, I'm just mentioning this because it's quite common. I find that particularly in larger organizations, there is not a shared understanding about what a product is, particularly what a digital product is. And then it can be useful to just take a look and say, okay, how many products are we dealing with? And are these assets, or is a specific asset, is it a feature? Is it a product? Is it a component? What is it? And therefore, does it need its own product goals? Because you don't want to go crazy and you don't want to identify goals or product goals for features. And then everything becomes horribly, in a way, bureaucratic, and you have roadmaps for features. And I don't think that makes any sense. So maybe worthwhile reflecting what is a product, and therefore, just to make sure that you set the goals at the right level.
Okay, so just following on from that one as well, there was another question. Let me just find it from which kind of on just on the scale side of things. More of a, I don't know, it's a rhetorical question, but I'll ask it anyway. Is it me, or does this sound a bit like product increment in SAFe? I suppose turning that question around is how do you assign or align maybe the product goals in SAFe? Is that something you would do at the product increment, or is it again something that it depends on the product itself?
So I must admit I'm not a SAFe expert. So I'm familiar with the basics of SAFe, and I've looked a little bit closer into how product ownership is structured in SAFe. in sort of standard Scrum, a product increment would be the output of a sprint, right? It would be the deliverable of a sprint, and therefore a product increment would have to kind of conform, or would have to help meet a sprint goal. And then by meeting a number of sprint goals and therefore producing a number of product increments, you would meet a product goal. You'd achieve a product goal. Yeah. So that's at least the way the Scrum guides puts it, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think just as a side note, and that's certainly the bit of the experience I had when I was involved in a couple of safe implementations, was that it depended on the product. Sometimes you could align it across as a product increment, and that suited that particular product. Others which had more almost releasable sub-products within it, then could align. It would be possible to align. So in some it was, in some cases it wasn't. But okay. Next question. What do you believe is the relationship between epics and product goals? Yeah,
another nice question. Thank you for asking those questions. So product goal really, it should be that's my take on it, right? Obviously, you're more than welcome to disagree, but I would suggest that a product goal should be specific and measurable, but it should be an outcome, a benefit that the product creates and that you create through your product, such as, for instance, helping people to understand their eating habits better, or helping people to improve their eating habits, or acquiring an initial user community, and then maybe extending that user community. Whereas an epic, that's at least my understanding of an epic. An epic will describe a piece of functionality. And in order to meet a product goal, many epics will have to be implemented. And if you take the idea that a product goal scopes the product backlog and helps us determine which items should be in the product backlog, you could say that, well, the product goal helps us understand which epics should be in the product backlog, and therefore which epics we should be working on. I mean, one of the key challenges with the product backlog that I've seen again and again and again over the years is that backlogs are just too big. And one of the reasons that backlogs are too big is because they're not really focused, because there are so many people that are creative and have great ideas. There's the product owner, and the development team members, maybe the Scrum Master, certainly the stakeholders, and they all have ideas, and they all want items and epics and user stories to be implemented. And so it can be easy to add hundreds of items to a product backlog, and then it's so big that it's really difficult to prioritize or order it and understand what should we do first. All these user stories and epics, they sound really good. And this is where the product goal comes in, right? I mean, you only add to the product backlog what helps you meet the product goal. Only those epics should be in the product backlog that help you move closer towards the specific goal. And if they don't help you, well, I would suggest you should remove them.
Yep.
I don't know if that was helpful.
Great. Yeah, I think it was a great answer, and I think we've all been there somewhat with the wish list product backlog that just grows and grows. Okay, so next one from Julia. How do you best go about readjusting the product goals throughout an existing product?
Oh yes, yeah, nice question. So. I mean, as we all know, a goal is something that that is forward-looking, right? I mean, we set ourselves a goal, and then depending on what happens, depending on how much progress we can make, if any unforeseen things happen, if a pandemic breaks out, for instance, or not, we may be able or we may not be able to meet our goals. And so setting the goals is one thing, but then regularly reviewing and adapting the goals is another thing. So for reviewing and adapting the sprint goals, well, that's what the sprint review meeting ultimately is there for, to understand have we met the sprint goal or not, and then we can adapt the product backlog and we can decide what should be then the goal for the next sprint. But what about the product goals? So my suggestion would be to review the product goals together with the entire product roadmap in a roadmap and strategy workshop. So I like to think about product owners and generally product people participating in two workflows. There's the tactical workflow that's more execution focused around the product backlog and epics and user stories and sprint goals. And then there's the more strategic workflow around user and customer goals, business goals, and the product goals. And as a rule of thumb, I would suggest that at least once a quarter, you jointly, collaboratively review the product strategy and product roadmap, and therefore the product goals with the stakeholders and the development team and the Scrum Master. But I think it's generally good practice at least once a week to look at the product performance, look at the KPIs, look at trends in the marketplace, look at the competition, and see if your strategic longer term goals, your product goals that you've captured on the product roadmap, if they're under threat, or if there are any opportunities maybe to I don't know, change them and offer an even better, even more valuable product. Yeah. So it's really about making time to regularly review your goals and adjusting them if and when when it's needed. Yeah, and as a rule of thumb, at least once a quarter, again as a collaborative road mapping, strategizing workshop.
Okay. All right. Next one we got from Sai. So if the product goal is now a commitment to the product backlog and a stepping stone to the 5 to 10 year product vision, do you think that the product vision will become a mandatory Scrum artifact in the future? I say it as the vision is so important, to my opinion.
Yeah, another great question. So I think the Scrum founders, Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland, have done a great job, at least in my view, to keep the Scrum framework simple and focused. And I guess some people like the changes that were made last year in the Scrum guide more, and some people like them less. Certainly the Scrum framework has grown a little bit, but I mean, my guess is that it's not going to grow significantly, at least not in the near future. And I personally like working with a vision, but I don't know if it really should be made mandatory. Again, I think it's important to understand that Scrum is a framework that facilitates or helps teams build complex products. It's not a product management framework. It's not a collection of tools for product owners. So, from a product management, from a product perspective, it only offers, limited help. But I think what it does offer is I find it very useful. I find it great. And then it's about complementing the artifacts and tools that are in the Scrum framework with what we need as product people, speaking from a product perspective, from a product management and product owner perspective, right? And I'd say, well, that's the product roadmap. That's a product strategy. That's maybe a business model, and that's a vision. And that together with the product backlog, I think is quite a powerful tool set, really.
Okay, excellent. Next one is which one? Okay, from Arvind, how do we scale the product road mapping session to work for multiple Scrum teams working on a product suite?
Yeah, again, a nice question. So if you have multiple Scrum teams that work in parallel, and each Scrum team looks after their own product, then I'd be tempted to say each product should have its own product roadmap. And then, it's a question of establishing an effective portfolio management process to offer shared strategic objectives across the portfolio, and therefore across all those teams and all the products. And synchronize the roadmaps as much as they need to, because you may, for instance, have inter-product dependencies, or you may want to offer updates, new releases across the suites at the same time. But that's then really the job of a portfolio manager or a product portfolio owner. Yeah. So, whenever we have multiple products, then there's just an added planning level in a way, and an added level of, I don't know, complexity, I guess. So we need to manage the entire portfolio and create kind of the context so that then the product owners can manage the individual products successfully.
Okay, thanks, Roman. Okay, next one. I'm not sure how long have you got, Roman? The Q&A is proving very popular.
That's all right. I've got time. I think it's
fantastic.
It's easy for me. It's very. I really enjoy your questions, and so I really enjoy answering them. I think it's more strenuous for you guys because you're listening to me all the time.
Yeah. No, this is great. I mean,
Stuart, do you mind if I just jump in for a second?
Sure.
We've had some questions asked on the Q&A panel rather than in the chat panel.
I've just grabbed them. Sorry, I was just about to say.
You have got them. Okay, I just wanted to check that you've got them.
I'll grab them. I'll go back again in a minute and check if any more have come in, but I just grabbed those and jumped back onto the chat. Okay. So, as I said, so we've got another, I don't know, 7 or 8 questions, and there's potential more seem to keep coming in. So we'll keep going for a bit. And whenever you've had enough, Roman, just shout.
That's all right.
Okay. We've got. Okay, just covered that one. All right. So from Eleanor, any advice on looking at possible sales? For example, investing X pounds, euros might bring Y revenue. The X is easier than the Y. I suppose we'll bring it back to the question. Is there any advice on, I'm assuming, your product goals in relation to sales?
Oh, yes. So products exist, right? I mean, products exist to create value for a group of people, users, customers, and the business. And so if revenue is one of the KPIs or one of the key benefits that the product should offer for the business, developing and providing it, then, I mean, that's certainly something to take into account. And so, a product goal could be to increase revenue by X, Y, Z, or to start generating revenue if it's, I don't know, an app, and if the business model is to entice people to make in-app purchases, for instance. So, like a freemium business model. And hopefully this should be addressed by the collaborative goal setting aspect that I touched upon. So the idea that you, as the product owner, don't just set the goals on your own, and then communicate them to the stakeholders and the development teams. I mean, that can work, but what I found is that often I'm in a position then where I'm trying to convince or even persuade people and sell my ideas to them. And I've found it more powerful to try and bring people on board, draw people in, involve people in the decision-making and goal-setting process, and listen to their ideas. And so for a commercial revenue-generating product, I would expect that one of the key stakeholders will be a sales rep, a sales representative. And then, hopefully the individual has some good ideas about some of the sales constraints or possible sales targets that could be generated. Yeah. But I mean, ultimately, this is also related to the business model. And that's why I mentioned earlier, in addition to the product backlog, I would say an effective Scrum product owner may want to use a product roadmap, a product strategy, a vision, and a business model.
Okay, excellent. Next one. This is I'm just trying to think. Okay, this is from Amra. Product backlog should be prepared in advance before the development start, or it's a question. Should the product backlog be prepared in advance before the development start, or is it okay to fill in the product backlog in parallel with development? What's your experience?
Both, I would suggest. So I think you need at least a very rough, basic or embryonic product backlog in order to get started. And I think there is no point in starting development if you're not clear on your product goal. And if you don't feel that that product goal is valid and it makes sense. And so I think what you then need in addition to that product goal is at least a few big high-level items like epics to, describe roughly what you want to do in order to achieve the goal. I mean, you can think about the product backlog items as describing the output that is necessary to describe to achieve the outcome, which should be captured by the product goal. But any product backlog, and that's certainly true for new products and young products, or generally when you have a lot of change, when your product is still changing or changing again significantly, then that product backlog should be truly emergent. So, items should be discovered based on the user feedback that you generate by exposing early product increments to at least selected individuals and listening to what they have to say. Maybe running some usability tests, maybe doing some early releases. So, if you were in a position where you can sort of anticipate correctly and in detail upfront all the product backlog items, you wouldn't need an iterative experimental process like Scrum. That you don't have the need to inspect and adapt, at least not when it comes to the product. And so you may be better off using a linear sequential Kanban-based process, for instance. So, start with a very focused initial embryonic product backlog. A good way to do this is really just focus on the key epics, sort of the key pieces of functionality that the product will have to offer in order to achieve the product goal. And then, use user feedback on early product increments in order to refine those items and break them down into more detailed stories.
Okay, excellent. So next one, what first steps can an organization take for teams that are transitioning from old school project mindset and structures to product team structures and mindset in order to create product roadmaps, product goals, product strategy, etc.?
All right, excellent question. Rather complex for me to answer. So I think when you try and make that transition, I think that the two things that need to happen. One thing is the organizational development and change piece, and then the other piece is around taking people along on the journey and upskilling people. So I think if you really want to move from say you're currently like banks and insurance companies used to be, at least traditionally, you're very much like a project-focused business. You want to then transition to being product-led and being product-focused. I think you really do need, top management, executive management buy-in, and ultimately the CEO or managing director should be a sponsor of that transformation effort, and should be involved and should understand what needs to happen. Just from my personal experience working with different companies, that may well entail creating and establishing a product management group and hiring a head of product, for instance. But it also means finding the right people to play the product owner roles or play product roles, and upskilling those people, particularly when these people are current employees. Often they know a lot about the domain, about the nature of the business, about the markets, which is great, but sometimes they don't have that much product management knowledge. And so again, they'll benefit from some form of learning and development measures. And sometimes it makes sense to hire people from the outside who experienced product people, may not know that much about the domain and the product, but have that product management knowledge, that methodical product management knowledge. But again, in order to be able to do those things, fund those learning and development measures, hire people and create new organizational units, I do think you need that top management buy-in. And there's nothing that prevents you from just giving it a go and trying to organize around a product and trying to keep a project team together, even after that specific project maybe has finished. and so that people continue to work on the same product. But again, if you want to establish that as the standard way of working, you probably do need that management buy-in. So I don't know if that was helpful and if that was good news.
Hopefully, I'm sure it was. So bear with me if I'm kind of jumping around a bit, because I'm trying to read through these questions well and try and order them in the head that I understand them before I ask. So hopefully I get my emphasis right. Okay, so this one's actually in two parts. I was going to ask it all, but I'll ask it in two parts. I'll ask the first part and get an answer, and then we'll do part two. So is it fair to say that the product goal can be used to filter the backlog, while the prioritization maximizes the value delivered?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, you could say filter in the sense that if you have a current and existing product backlog, by identifying a product goal, say for the next 3 to 4 months, you would then say, okay, which of those items are truly relevant, at least for the next 3 to 4 months for that specific period.
Mm-hmm. I'll ask the second part of the question, because maybe it might have an impact the first one. So second part was, if they are used as a filter, then you may end up delivering less than optimal value, brackets, value of other items may be relatively higher. Further, it may collide with urgent issues. Please elaborate on this, and please elaborate on how this could be approached.
So the value piece for me is addressed by not looking at product goals in isolation. And that's one of the reasons why I've suggested think about product goals for the next 12 months and use those product goals to anticipate as much as you can the likely journey of your product, the likely development of your product. And secondly, make sure that those product goals are connected to higher level user and business goals and are derived from what I would call a product strategy. And in fact, a validated product strategy where you've shown that you've selected the right target group, the right value proposition, the right standout features, and the right business goals. And so by having that those validated user and business goals, and by putting an individual product goal in context, hopefully that helps you address that value piece. Now, with the urgent work, there are various ways how you can play this. Personally, I'm a big fan of having the development teams that build new features also maintain existing functionality in production. Because I think that encourages a quality mindset, and I think it fosters learning. People have to have the opportunity to go back, look at old code, and fix bugs, fix defects. And so, a common way to do this in a Scrum-based context is that you reserve a budget, a maintenance budget, or a budget for urgent, unplanned work each sprint. But if you have a lot of issues in your product, if you have a significant amount of technical debt, then it may be the best thing to dedicate a whole sprint just to getting over some of those issues and removing some of that technical debt, or possibly even a longer period. So a product goal could be, I think a legitimate product goal would be future-proof the product by removing technical debt. That could be the product goal that you choose for the next 3 months, and that be then really the focus. And you wouldn't really add any new end-user facing functionality. You just make sure that what you have is solid again, and that you can then in the future add new functionality quickly and change existing functionality quickly. This is something, by the way, that many years ago Apple did with an operating system release called Snow Leopards. It took them 2 years to port Leopards into new hardware and remove a lot of technical debt and do a lot of architecture refactoring. Now, I'm not suggesting that you spend 2 years now doing this for your products, but Apple is not a small company, and their products tend to be okay. I guess they tend to work. So if Apple has to do it, chances are some other companies will have to do it occasionally as well. And again, maybe not 2 years, maybe a sprint, or maybe 2 or 3 months.
Okay, excellent. We've probably got about another 5 or so questions. Some of them look as if they could be relatively short, but well, as I said, as soon as we think we want to draw the line, then just shout. Right, I'm quite interested in this one, especially in some organizations which are working under tender-based. How could we use product goals? Sometimes a team could work on 2 or 3 projects at the same time because of big tenders. How is it beneficial to use a single product goal at a time?
Yeah, cool. Interesting question. So maybe I'm being over optimistic here, but I actually think it might be helpful to include 1 or more product goals in a contract and help that in order to scope the piece of work, and again provide a context and umbrella for the product backlog and detailed product backlog items. I mean, you can think of a product goal as an objective. What is an objective that you want to achieve with your product over, say, the next 2 to 6 months? And I do think that it can make a lot of sense to talk to clients about this and say, look, this is and understand what are the objectives that the clients have in mind, what is realistic, and what can you as the agency or the service provider, what can you offer, what can you suggest? So maybe something to consider.
Okay, excellent. Got one here on it, which is on a slightly different angle. Slightly different tangent, but again, a common question or common problem that people run into. What are the things you would recommend that have worked to create an awesome product owner community in an organization?
Yes. Coffee? No, I'm joking. might be part of the solution. So I think it's really giving people time and encouragement to share. I really think that is maybe the biggest issue for product people. Product people tend to have a job with many different duties. There are so many different things that compete for their time, and giving people that time just to come together and connect and chat together without pressures, without we must achieve this. I think that's a great gift. So if that's something an organization can facilitate, I think that's wonderful. And you can do this in various forms. One way would be some form of brown bag lunches, possibly, even though I guess people do sacrifice their lunchtime then. But maybe even better, say on a regular basis have a community of practice meeting, and that could be every now and then take place as an open source meeting where you maybe spend half a day reflecting on current ways of working, current standards, you could say, and how you can improve them. Across different products and maybe across different possibly parts of the organization, depending on the size of the organization. But yeah, really giving people the opportunity to mix and mingle and come together. And of course, this might be in the office in the future or online right now or in the future. But yeah, giving people the time to do this and signaling to people that this is important. But that be the job of a head of product. So really, a key job of the head of product is to build that community and help that community prosper and grow. At least in theory.
Yeah, excellent. Always a tricky area, trying to get senior managers to sponsor such things as free time and spare time to do some of these kind of things. Okay, nothing from Andrew. Is there a danger with more and more levels that a story no longer delivers value in its own right?
Yeah, interesting question. So, I guess, we can say the idea that a story, an individual single story, should deliver value goes back to Bill Wake's INVEST criteria, right? Where the V stands for valuable. But to me, the notion that, every single story, no matter how big or small it is, has to create measurable end user value, that notion I don't think is helpful. And I'd actually say it's wrong. End users are not interested in small pieces of functionality, which user stories typically describe, but end users are interested in getting a job done. End users are interested in essentially, understanding eating habits, for instance, or improving eating habits. And, the fact that they have to then maybe provide personal information or choose a username or do these kind of things, well, it has to be done so that that overarching goal can be achieved. So if you, again, I mean, I'm probably biased here, and you feel free to disagree with me, but if you derive your product goals from a validated product strategy and validated user and business goals, so that the product goals help you meet those higher level goals, and then you derive epics and user stories from the product goal that you've chosen, then all the stuff you're working on, all the epics and user stories, they should be valuable. Not every single one maybe generate measurable value for an end user, but you can put a price tag on it or a value tag on it, and it says that many pounds of sterlings or euros or US dollars or whatever the currency might be. But it's all needed. It's all good stuff in order to meet this overarching product goal.
Okay. I think we've got just a couple more left if we can last out. In fact, yeah, one, maybe two. Okay. From Arvind, how do you prioritize an epic tied to a product goal versus a set of high priority, smaller features?
Yeah, interesting question. So I think the idea in Scrum, one of the assumptions in Scrum is that focus, isn't that one of the Scrum values, is useful. And so the Scrum team should be focused on a sprint goal, and the Scrum team should be focused on one product goal at a time. And there should be one overarching product vision. Again, if you read the old Scrum books. Sorry, I'm getting really tired now. Can you say that question again?
Yeah, sure. It's the last one. It's the last one, and yeah, I'm going to draw the line there anyway after this one. But I think we've captured all the questions, and I think this is the final one. How do you prioritize an epic tied to a product goal versus a set of high priority, smaller features?
Yes, thank you. So now I remember where I was going with that focus idea. So, Scrum always, I think there's this slightly idealistic idea that we can be focused purely, totally on one goal at a time. But I mean, Scrum is a framework, Scrum is a model, right? And we all know reality isn't quite like what a model suggests. Model is an abstraction of reality. It simplifies reality. So, in the real world, unforeseen things happen. And in addition to meeting that product goal, there may be additional features, unforeseen pieces of work that we have to work on. And I think that's then really a call a product owner has to make, and to find the right balance between keeping everyone well focused on that product goal and using that product goal to create alignments and a shared sense of direction, versus catering for unplanned work or urgent requests that actually may have to be implemented, sometimes for regulatory reasons, compliance reasons, for instance. So yeah, that's very much the product owner's call, I think. And again, ideally, the product owner may want to involve the stakeholders and at least development team representatives in that decision-making process. And ideally, if you have a regular strategy and road mapping workshops where you review your product goals, then hopefully you're not caught out by any bigger changes. So I don't know if that was helpful.
Yeah, I think so. Right, I'm just going to read it. There's one more thing here. It's not a question. I'm just going to read it because I read it, and first of all, I thought it was a question. When I read it again, I thought that's not. It's actually a statement, but it's something that kind of resonates with me, and I've found from my experience as well. So I think it's just a good thing to call out here. So it's come from James, and he said, we find in implementing Scrum in non-technical / blended teams, or non-technical teams / blended teams, that a product vision, the why, and product goals, the what and the when, have always been the best way to galvanize an organization, giving transparency and focus, in order to get the commitment and support from sponsors and stakeholders, and thus giving greater clarity to the Scrum team and improving the chance of delivering the incremental value. Now, to me, I said that resonates massively with a lot of my experience over the years, and kind of sums up really well the value in product visions and product goals. So I just thought that was a nice thing to pick out and summarize at the end. So Roman, is there anything else from you? I know we've bled you for 45 minutes on questions and answers, so I big thank you for bearing with us and answering all the questions that have come in. Is there anything else that you'd like to finish before I summarize with before I wrap up?
Just really to say thank you for your attention. Thanks for being here. It was lovely to hear your questions. So I hope it was a little bit useful, and as often the proof is in the pudding. So if you're in doubt, then maybe just give it a go and experiment with product goals and see how it works for you. So yeah, good luck.
Okay.